In a few seconds, you're going to see me interview Shawn KhunKhun, which is the CEO of a massive silver mining company. It's not every day that you get to sit down for an hour and pick the brain of someone like Shawn, so I chose my questions very specifically, and he did not disappoint. I encourage you to watch till the very end because you'll see why I asked the questions the way that I did. I want to personally thank Shawn so much for taking time out of his very busy day to talk to myself, but most importantly, you, my audience. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and let's talk silver.
Connection established.
Welcome back and thank you for tuning in. We have a very special episode today. You might want to grab some popcorn. We are here with Shawn KhunKhun, the CEO of Dolly Varden, which is a silver mining company. As you may know, most of my content surrounded upon the fundamentals, supply and demand, shortage, and all that. So talking to someone like Shawn is perfect. So I think it's going to be a good one. As you most likely saw our last episode with Andy, it was really good. You guys loved it. So yeah, Shawn, it's good to have you back. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I have a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk about today. First off, what's going on? Is there anything with Dolly you wanted to mention, or is there anything going on with your company?
Yeah, listen, since the last time you had me on, and I really enjoyed the chat we had with Andy Scheckman. The company has continued to make new discoveries, and just to remind your viewers and for anybody new to the channel, I've got a company that's up in Canada that has taken over a couple of past producing high grade silver mines. So these were some of the richest silver mines in the world, some of the country's largest silver mines when they were operating. And my business model for the company is to try to, through exploration, discovery, and by buying up neighboring mines, to put together and amass a large silver inventory. Because my belief is as the silver price rises, the value of those ounces in the ground is going to go up. And that, to me, is the most levered way for a silver speculator, a silver investor to get access to metals. So part of that vision is on the discovery side. So we employ some of the best scientists in the world, and these scientists have come up with theories and ideas based on other discoveries. There's been about 1.2 billion ounces of silver discovered outside of my property. We've got about a tenth of that discovered on our property. And so what we've had in August is we've put out some expansion discovery news. So we've stepped away from known deposits. We've stepped out and we're showing that the silver is continuing. So as we estimate the tonnage, the number of new ounces we're discovering, it's quite meaningful, it's quite material. And then on the back of that, and Slayer, you probably know Eric Sprott, legendary
Yeah.
silver investor. So Eric is leading a financing. So we've got a bunch of our loyal investors, including Eric Sprott, Sprott Asset Management, and some of the Sprott fund managers who are part of a $32 million financing. So our investors came to us and said, look, we want you guys to continue doing what you're doing. You're adding high grade silver mineral inventory. And so the company is going to double down on the exploration efforts. We're expanding the program, and I'll be going to various conferences in the month of September, and I'll be able to tell the investing world that the company's got over $40 million in the bank, which is a pretty strong place for a little junior exploration company. So yeah, that's what's new at Dolly Varden.
Wow, that's incredible. It seems like you guys are very strategic upon, how you're going about this, and it's very clever. I really did like how you mentioned last time that you're just building like an underground, bank account.
If you think something is undervalued, why would you give it away when it's undervalued?
Right.
So why rush out when I think silver, it's less hated today than it was 4 years ago. But when I came into Dolly Varden, silver was around $16 an ounce. It was hated. And if you think about most companies, they couldn't make money mining silver. So why would I go out and exert a bunch of energy, a bunch of capital and time doing something that's not profitable? That didn't make a lot of sense to me. What made a lot of sense to me, though, was because of the low silver price, the valuations of these projects were nothing. Dolly Varden, despite being the richest silver mine in the British Empire, Canada's third largest silver producing mine, was trading at a valuation closer to $15 million. And with the price of silver doubling, and with us making some strategic moves, like buying some additional deposits that increase our mineral inventory and hiring the right scientists that have unlocked the discovery potential of the project, the value of the company has gone from about 15 million to about 300 million. And think about that. If you look at where silver's scheduled to go, you know, just industrial use alone is
Right.
scheduled to consume all the silver we as an industry mine. So if you really think about that, by the end of 2025, which is only 16 months away, if there is 1% in investment demand, if a guy like me or a guy like you wants to go and get some physical silver because it's a hedge against inflation, it's a hedge against systemic risk, well, we're going to be competing with industry. Industry is going to take
Yeah.
all the 850 million ounces what we're mining. So to me, that is like I look at the last 100 years in silver, there was two moments that investment demand drove price. Okay. Back in 1980, where the price went
Yep.
to $50, and back in 2011, the price went to $49. So out of the last 100 years, there was two occasions where investment demand drove price. Now, the other 98% of the time, we were in a bear market. We were in a market where it was just based on industry. Now, despite being in a bear market, investment demand, Slayer, was still at 30%, around 250 million ounces a year. Okay. So the reason we're seeing annual deficits of north of 250 million ounces is because industry, through all these new applications, and this is before Samsung developed the silver battery.
I was gonna mention that too.
Sorry, so maybe that's a nice segue into that battery because I think
Yeah.
this could be a game changer for the industry.
Yep. I'm working on a video literally right before we got on. I'm like in the middle of like putting this big video about it.
I was listening to Eric Sprott talking about this battery last week, and he talked about how this battery, the time to charge the battery is 9 minutes, and he joked that it takes about 5 minutes to fill your car up with gas. Like, what's 9 minutes? It's nothing. And the range, like 900-kilometer range. So I think it's a kilo of silver that is needed in every single battery.
Yep.
And
That's
this,
true.
this is a game changer for the automotive industry. It's a game changer for the silver mining industry. It further challenges the industry from the standpoint of where are we getting all this silver that the world is asking for, and that's where I'm starting to move my head around to the idea that maybe it's not about silver the silver to gold ratio going to 40 to 1 or 30 to 1, maybe this is a metal that, like rhodium or like gold to platinum. I was remarking on another podcast recently back in 2007 when I was proposing to my wife. Platinum was the thing to buy on for wedding bands, you know, and I opted to go and get white gold. And I just, gold to me has always been, more money than platinum. And it happened to be trading at a third the valuation. Well, today gold is worth more than platinum. So we could be in an environment in the future where the silver to gold ratio goes from 90, and maybe it doesn't stop at 30. Maybe it goes to 10, maybe it
Right.
even lower. And because of silver's growing industrial use, and it's a
Yeah.
spectacular special metal.
That's what I try to focus on the most is the macro. And I don't think Samsung's battery is the last. I think this is going to continue as we advance in this new digital technological era, as silver is the most highly conductive metal. I bet in a month or a couple months or a year, there's going to be another battery or another innovation that requires just as much. Because I've been seeing most of these applications like solar panels, instead of cutting back the amount of silver they use in each one, they're using more because it makes it more efficient. We all assumed, like I even remember watching, they use 50 something grams in like an EV, and they're trying to cut it down to like 22. We all assumed that would continue, but it's actually looking like we're going to be requiring more silver in all of these. Like the solar panels now, they're using on the backside because the ones in like desert areas, it reflects off the sand, so they're able to get. So now they're using twice as much in the solar panels as well. But I want to revert back. You mentioned something about 1.2 billion ounces in surrounding, because that's how much our annual demand was last year. Is that what you were talking about?
So, where Dolly Varden is located is up in an area that they refer to as the Golden Triangle. So, this is an area that people think of it as a gold area, an area that is, some call it the most prolific, the richest 20 kilometers on planet Earth for gold mineralization. And people celebrate the 155 million ounces of gold. Like, if you were to get out a calculator and multiply 155 million by $2,500 an ounce. That that is a lot of gold discovered up in the Golden Triangle. Now, what people miss, what they omit from the story, is 1.2 billion ounces of silver that have been discovered alongside that gold. And to me, what attracted me to this area was what started as a silver mine, the premier mine that the Guggenheim family had in the 1920s, and they were producing in the 1930s. And I'm a student of history, and what I've studied is, different times in history where gold and silver were extremely relevant. And I focused on those times and I asked myself, as I looked at debts that were rising, as I looked at some of the challenges that we're facing as a world, scarcity, overpopulation. And I looked at all these challenges and I asked myself, were there times in history that were similar, and what did people do to successfully get through these difficult times? What happened when wars went from regional to global? What preceded those hot wars? Were there trade wars? Were there currency wars? And I've done a lot of reading. I've had teachers like Jim Rickards and I mentioned Eric Sprott and others who've done some incredible work. I see a Miles Franklin hat just to the right of you there, and people like Andy Scheckman, who have been very vocal about what's happening. And anyways, what it's all come down to for me is very simply here up in Canada in the north, what got us through the Great Depression was gold and silver mining. And so I looked at the area, and the premier mine, it started as a silver discovery. It became known at the time as the richest gold mine of the era. And then that was outdone in the 1980s by the Eskay Creek mine. And then now we've got Newmont, which is the world's largest publicly traded gold mining company. This is a company that's making like $2 billion a year. They are operating something called the Brucejack mine. So these are all mines in the Golden Triangle. And my point here is, when I came across Dolly Varden 4 years ago, I saw a similarity in the area. Dolly had some silver, high grade silver, past production. But the question I had was, how much more could we find? Number
Right.
one. Number two was, could we find gold like these other great mines that were around us? And so what's changed in the last couple of years is we've gone from 40 million ounces to 65, but we've also added 1 million ounces of gold. And
Mm.
that's just from a compliant third party estimate. We've actually made a lot more discoveries that haven't been incorporated into the resource estimate. But I fundamentally believe this is a 100 million ounce silver camp on an equivalent basis. If you factor in the gold, we're already there. We're closer to 150 million ounces silver equivalent already. And so I think we'll take that 65 million ounces of silver, and I think it has the potential to go to 100. But how many millions of ounces of gold will we discover alongside?
Right. Just with byproduct. Yeah, what is the byproduct? What does that look like with most mines or most of yours in your
Listen,
experience?
they're all different, but I think this what your question takes me to an important idea, and the important idea is most of the silver in the world is a byproduct. Really,
Yeah.
something
Yep.
like 71.5% of silver comes off as a byproduct. So if we get into an environment where Samsung and other companies decide to use more and more, and you get more of these double-sided solar panels and photovoltaics, and the whole solar industry has gone from 3% of the market 10 years ago to about 15% of the market today, and scheduled to go to 50% of the market. And that's without the double-sided panels. But
Right.
if you look at some of those growing use cases, now if I'm Samsung, and I say, okay, well, I need a lot more silver. The challenge that I'm going to have as an executive at Samsung is if silver's getting thrown off as a byproduct, I've got to go to a copper miner. I've got to go to a lead zinc miner, and I've got to go and ask them to increase their focus. But it doesn't work that way. If it's coming in as a byproduct, they're there to mine the base
That
metals.
right.
So, so really, where I think the sweet spot, Slayer, in the industry is identifying the 28.5% of the silver mining market, which is the primary pure silver mines. And what's even more important and rare is finding those mines in a place where people want you to mine. So
Boom.
the number one
Yeah.
silver producing country in the world is Mexico.
Mexico, yeah, I made a video about their situation
What is
with
their
them. Yeah.
situation? Like,
They're
talk.
they're trying to nationalize it and keep it all for themselves because they're saying all the resources are here. Why are we giving it away? Along with their president is really strong, standing strong again with the green movement. So there's a whole because Mexico and Peru those two countries alone, along with China recently, they accumulate like nearly half of the global silver production. So if a country like Mexico is keeping it all for themselves, that could really, push some disruptions.
Slayer, I
Yeah.
remember in 2008, when the global financial crisis began and the world questioned whether it was going to get off the dollar standard. People are very critical when speculators talk about some of the recent activities from the BRICS, and they say, well, there's this fear mongering and we're never going to get off the dollar. Well, the dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since the inception of the Federal Reserve. Number one. Number two, in different times in history, people have ran and fled from dollars. There was a rush away from dollars in the 1970s. And that's why gold went to over $800 an ounce. It's also why silver went from pennies to almost $50 an or to $50 an ounce. But I remember um, in Mexico, particularly, and you got to think about the amount of physical US dollars that are out there, particularly in the Latin American world, South America, Central America. There's a tremendous amount of dollars. Um, and as the dollar on the US dollar index was down at 72 points. Okay, and that's a measure against a basket of currencies. I think there's 8 currencies, and the biggest weighting is against the euro, for about 50%, but the yen's in there, and the Canadian dollar, the Aussie dollar. Um, my point here is there was a moment during the financial crisis from about September to about December where there was a tremendous amount of uncertainty. There was million jobs being lost on a monthly basis in the United States. You had the real estate market falling. You had banks falling, and in Mexico, there were a lot of businesses that said the only form of payment that we want to take is silver. They were taking silver over US dollars. So I don't think it's a coincidence that, you're looking at potential nationalization of the silver mining industry. And it doesn't start overnight. It doesn't start with
Right.
it starts slowly. It starts with, you need to, even if you're just a little exploration company, you need to let us know, you need to do all this permitting as if you're a building, a miner. And then it goes to, oh, you know what? We don't want you to use this type of mining. And right now it's a focus on no open pit mining, right?
Yep.
Slowly, just like we've seen, here in North America with something like the Patriot Act, starting, approximately 23 years ago, um, your freedoms get slowly eroded, not all at once, and that's what I see happening, and it's why for me, I went and I focused in Canada because to me, you've got this, multi-century history of stable mining, and it's what got us through tough times in the past, and I think it's what's going to get us through tough times in the future.
Yeah, there's very few silver mines. And I've always, yeah, like it's interesting when you brought up a company like Samsung or someone moving forwards. I always use like Elon Musk as the mascot. It's much bigger than him, but think about someone like him that owns Tesla, SpaceX, Starlink. Imagine a company like that in a few years from now, or even a year from now, trying to find a source without paying premiums. A lot of people look at silver as, oh, I don't want to pay this price when it gets to here, but it more than likely would be I can't find it, more than anything. So it's very interesting to look at silver as a byproduct and most people not knowing how much is left. I read an article from, I think it's the J Post, where they're saying that we might completely run out of silver by 2025. Like I mean, I don't know how true that is, but just looking at, numbers like that with the demand, they're expecting 252 million ounce deficit this year, like over 750 million ounce deficit in the last 4 years, not including aerospace and military that aren't even, configured in the numbers. I just think it's way worse than most people realize, including myself, I'm sure, that talks
And, and,
about this.
and I'll tell you from my experience, like when I was finishing high school, I started looking at these reports that were coming out that talked about because central banks were big sellers of gold. Okay, they were, when I was, whether it's grade school, high school, gold was hated. Gold was irrelevant. Gold was this asset that had gone to 800 and it had, averaged at around $350 an ounce through the 1980s, through the 1990s. And central banks were out there, central banks in Canada sold all their gold. Central bank in the UK sold half, England, the Bank of England sold half their gold, around $250 an ounce. And so I was reading these reports. I'll never forget reading these reports in 1999 about how the central bank selling that had occurred for 2 decades was coming to an end. And that selling could actually alleviate the sell pressure and the price suppression of the yellow metal. And there were some incremental things that I watched over the years. Like, for example, there's a riot in the United States, the Rodney King riots. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but in that moment, the price of gold spiked. You look at 9/11, when the planes came into the towers, the price of gold spiked. And so, my takeaway was, so we went through 2 decades where this metal was irrelevant and everybody was selling it, every central bank on the planet. But when we got into turbulent times, everybody fled to it. So my takeaway from all this was we are going to see a massive run in gold. And it happened. It went from, call it 300 to 1900, from 2000 to 2011. So there's a lot of people that have been listening and reading and going, when's it going to happen for silver? I've been hearing about the silver squeeze that played itself out. I think it was January 2021. And
Yeah,
here we are, 3.5 years later, and the price is around the same. So when's this? But what I'm telling you is you're not looking at it through the right context. If you
right.
look at it and look at average prices, whether it's a 200-week average, a 200-day average, really what you'll see is the price of silver has quietly doubled. and sustained it. And now we're moving to a place where, and the best way I can explain this to your viewers, it's like putting gas in the tank. And the last decade, we've been putting gas in this tank, and the more gas you put in the tank, the farther the car will go. And so the more base building we're doing here in the high 20s, in the low 30s, when it goes liftoff, and the J Post is right. Industrial demand is going to take up all silver supply. So what's going to happen when investment demand comes in? It's going to go north of 50. And what I've learned is when any asset, stock, real estate, metal, when you get into an all-time high, there's no overhead resistance. And
Right.
so, the price, it could go to a place that maybe isn't sustainable, right? But, it could be extremely profitable for
Yeah.
those who are accumulating a position down here.
Yep. Yep. I agree. When we broke past the 12-year highs, recently, um, it's a lot easier for it to go higher than it is harder for it to go lower. Whereas before it was a lot harder to break above 30 and a lot easier to drop back down, right? We kept hitting our head at 30, but now we broke past that resistance. And last time we saw this was when it was on the way to $50. So, once we reach 50, the sky is the limit.
And
And
I'll tell you, there's a great lesson to be learned in Bitcoin when it
oh
applies.
yeah, yeah,
If you go back to around 2008, 2009 and see where Bitcoin was priced, it took about a decade. It wasn't until 2017 that Bitcoin started marching from the pennies, from the dollars. And where did it go? It went to $20,000 a coin. And then it pulled back to like 6,000 and then it
right.
offshoot ran again. And I don't follow the market that closely, but I think it or 70,000 or
Yeah,
something.
it's like it's 60,000 right now.
60 now.
Dude, I was telling people to buy Bitcoin on this channel in 2015 when it was like $200 or something, like way back. Now I haven't talked about it in years after it took off. But yeah, I was back
But,
like
but silver
2016,
But silver,
same
that,
thing.
whereas look, um, silver's got a long history, as money. Silver is a concept where if you're not tech savvy, and the reality is most of the world isn't, right? And so there's a lot of investors. And if you look at where wealth is concentrated, it's with the older part of the population.
Oh
They
yeah,
feel a lot more comfortable going out and buying gold and silver than they are something that if the lights go out, the electricity stops, or if you get
right.
hacked, you're vulnerable and there's no counterparty risk. So I think this bull market in precious metals, it could be one of the greatest markets we ever see across the board in history. And it does feel like we're setting up for a reset. It does feel like we're setting up for a new monetary system. It does feel like, power has shifted like it always does. Fiats die like they always have. And, I think that, for anybody out there who's going, who's struggling, people are losing their jobs, inflation is high, you know, silver's so wonderful that it's trading at like $30 an ounce right now because you can go out and everybody can find $30 and get themselves exposure to an ounce of silver. And I think, I've never seen an investment opportunity in my lifetime like this. And what's wonderful is there's multiple reasons why demand is going to continue to stay
Yeah.
elevated. Investment demand, industrial demand. It's an incredible narrative.
It's honestly insane to think about how many things silver has going for it beyond just, the monetary side of it. Like there's like I always talk about like I could sit at, a bar stool or a bar or something, and a guy sits down next to me and talks about why is silver better than stocks or something. I could sit there easily and tell him 10 reasons why silver is the best investment. I can tell him 10 reasons why stocks are a terrible investment moving forwards, right? All the stars are aligning and the perfect storm is coming. And I feel like it's going to be the fundamentals that truly does push it over. The short is
There's one thing that we got to talk about, and I don't know if you can see this, but
yep,
it's an ounce of
yep,
silver. And
Mugshot bars.
this is a guy that
The
if he gets elected, has been called a weak dollar president, right? And if the U.S. dollar gives way, what's going to go up? Everything
right.
priced in dollars, gold and silver. So there, we've got 2 months. I think we've got the next 2 months, and historically, September and October have been weak for this metal. If you
Yep.
go back a year, I think per silver was like $20 an ounce. If you go back to private previous year, it was like 18. So I think there may be a seasonal opportunity over the next 60 days to accumulate this metal with some weakness. If you look out to where I think it'll be in the spring, I think it'll be dramatically higher. I think we're going to see a four handle on silver. I think we're going to see it run up to, early 40s. But, if you go out a further year, I think we're going to see the all-time highs. We're going to see
Mm.
silver dance at levels that we've never seen it go. And, my target is in the low 70s initially. And there's a lot of evidence, inflation adjusted numbers that support that. That should be the inflation adjusted high for silver. And that's where I think we're going. But, there's a lot of people that are out there that have put a lot more capital and time into the metal that think triple digit silver is inevitable. So, my
Yeah.
call may be very light.
Yeah. I mean, just think about like 10 years from now what it could be. The dollar most likely won't even exist in 10 years. Or, just think about like 10, 15, 20 years from now what silver's price could be. Like, think how many things are going to happen. Like, the unknown variables I always talk about. The unknown variables are something that nobody ever incorporates. Like Samsung's new battery, I'm sure by next year there's going to be something else that uses a whole bunch of silver we never saw coming, pushing the, demand even higher. And there's going to be another situation that plays out, geopolitically or whatever. Like people are very short-sighted when looking at or trying to forecast things, especially with like price predictions.
Well, I think it's a reflection of the world we live in today, with information swirling around quickly. I think we live in an instant gratification universe, and I think having patience um, isn't something that investors have. We've become more speculators and traders than we have in, real true investors. And I think, sit tight and be right. Be patient. Good business is boring, and it's such. I've been around this metal for 20 years professionally. Um, I've been around gold a lot longer, and for me, this is an opportunity for at the right time to actually turn my silver into some more gold. But this is a time where I'm turning my gold into silver.
So I want to pick your brain a little bit on more of the tinfoil hat stuff, silver confiscation. Now, I want to start by mentioning that it actually has happened before. A lot of people don't know this. Most people know about the Executive Order 6102 by FDR in 1933, stating that everyone should turn in their gold or pay a $10,000 fine or 10 years imprisonment or both. But actually, the following year, there was Executive Order 6814, which was the same exact thing, but with silver, stating, give us all your silver, pay a $10,000 fine, 10 years imprisonment, or both. Most people don't know about the silver one because the first executive order was so popular. So, do you think that silver confiscation in today's world is realistic, and why?
That's a really good question. And look, one thing I want to go back on is after the government confiscated as much as it could, some of it just was people were going to take the risk of the fines.
Right. Yeah.
But for those law-abiding citizens who did turn in their gold, sadly, it was revalued at twice the price instantaneously,
Yeah.
which is so
Yeah.
sad. Because they were given half of that value when they turned in their gold. And look, the way I look at this issue is similar to the way I look at how do we how do we solve the problems that we have today? And I think there's going to be multiple ways that we do that. And basically, through higher taxes, through inflation is how we are going to pay back all these debts. And so when it comes to confiscation of silver, I think it's possible, but if the end goal is for the government to get their hands on the silver, I think there's two ways to go about it. There's, you either attack the industry, right? Or you attack the public that owns it. And I think
Yep.
what's working in the favor of the government is there isn't enough individual ownership. If you look at the percentage allocated to precious metals globally by the average person, it's not what it used to be. It used to be 2% of wealth was concentrated into precious metals. It's a fraction of a percentage today. So I actually don't know how effective confiscation would be. But look, I was told when I first got into this business 20 years ago that you need to go out and take any excess earnings that you have and accumulate this stuff because there is going to come a time, whether it's government or it's industry. I was told it's going to be industry. Industry is going to be knocking on their doors, looking for those kilo bars, looking for those, 100 ounce. I don't have any 1,000 ounce because I don't know if I can lift them, but but I have enough trouble with 100 ounce bars. But no, I've been stacking silver for a long time. I think I started silver in '08.
Were you wanting to sell when it hit 50 3 years later? That's great
So
profits right there.
I went down to a conference called Freedom Fest in Las Vegas in 2008, and it was the first time I ever saw Rick Rule. And I was just, I was going to say I was a kid, maybe 25, 26 years old, something like that. And so I go down to this conference and I had a $20 Canadian bill and I exchanged that $20 bill for an ounce of silver. And I actually, when I got back home, I had my mom take a picture of me with an ounce of silver and a $20 bill. And I said to her, with a lot of conviction, I said, I want to record this and I want to, one day show my kids, so they understand, what I was able to do here. And, had I been a little bit younger, and on this a little bit earlier, it would have been a $5 bill and an ounce of silver.
Right.
I remember when hearing about Warren Buffett coming into the silver market, it was sub $5 an ounce. But look, I just think that it's one of these things where it's taken a lot of time, a lot of patience. A lot of investors wouldn't be prepared to be as patient as that. Like, I think that, what I'm looking for here, what I was told is, you only have to get rich once. You only have to be right in a big way once. And you'll probably feel wrong before you are right. So, what I actually did is I started getting greedy and I had accumulated, about six figures of physical metal by around 2010. And I emptied out my safe and I turned that six figures of metal and I put it all into one silver mining stock. And
Whoa.
that silver mining stock in 4 months went up 800%.
Wow.
And the warrants that were associated with the investment went up another 400%. So it was I turned something like, 100 grand into $1.2 million.
Wow.
And I sold and I took my money off the table and I patiently waited to get back into the gold market. I got back into gold in 2014 and I invested in a company that had previously, during the run in 2009, 10, and 11, had gone up to about a $40 million valuation. And this company had landed on my desk. It was called Bonterra Resources. And it was trading so it was at a $40 million valuation around 2010. I started investing in at a $500,000 valuation with the thinking that if it can get back to half of its old high, it should be a pretty good investment.
Which it
500.
always will. Right.
Well, you know where it went? within 18 months, it went to $100 million valuation. It
Right.
didn't go to half its value, it went to two and a half
Right.
times. And
And all,
so,
yeah.
and so after that, I said to myself in around 2018, I think it's time to get it back into silver. That was 6 years ago. And so I did get out of silver in and around 2011, the spring of 2011 on that run to 50. And I started getting back into silver in 2018. And that's when I found Dolly Varden. I found Dolly Varden in 2019 and took over as CEO in February 2020. Stock was 20 cents. It's north of $1 today. So already it's gone up 5x. And I don't think this bull market's even begun. But I'm out there looking all over the world for silver investing opportunities and ideas. And sadly, in 4.5 years since I took over Dolly, I've only come across two assets that have where I think we can, you can really get true primary exposure to the metal, and where I see the gains, 10x, 20x opportunities.
Yeah, I always tried to look at things from the perspective of like a silver miner. Because I talk to Andy all the time, like I'm the silver YouTuber, like just the normal silver buyer, but then I can talk to someone like Andy who sells it, and now talking to you who digs it up. It's very interesting to see all these different game plans and strategies, but I definitely see a lot of potential in what you're doing. Do you think technology will be able to help you find silver easier, like surfacing it, or like maybe some type of like AI, like to, I don't know, like do you think that's going to make things easier in the future?
Looking at some very, very successful entrepreneurs in the mining space, they have used AI to help them go through exploration data. So there's, the value in a project, a historic project, is all the data that's been amassed. And, what could take you a decade with a large team and a lot of capital. I've had mentors and peers tell me that they've been able to leverage AI to go through and analyze this information faster. It hasn't been my experience. I have not, I can't sit here hand over heart and say there's, I have seen technology. The only time I could say technology's played a role in my business success is about, I don't know, 15 years ago. We used LiDAR technology to understand structures, because if you think about gold and silver, when they came in and were deposited into these projects, they came in a liquid form. And if you understood the structures, you'd understand, they're flowing and they're looking for the path of least resistance, and they're flowing along these structural corridors. And so LiDAR to me was a breakthrough. I think of all these things as tools in my toolbox. Up at Dolly Varden, we've learned that there's a relationship between elevated potassium levels. So studying the ground and studying the soils and understanding where there's elevated potassium has been coincident with silver.
Hmm.
Also, where sodium has been depleted. And so, look, these are all tools you know, in our toolbox. And it's about triangulating all of this information, the geophysics, the geochemistry, the geology, and then, but you've got to go and you've got to take the shot, you've got to drill the hole, you've got to assay the sample, and a lot of it is luck in terms of being in the right place at the right time. You've got to work very hard to get there, but yeah. So I have heard anecdotally that AI has helped some of my peers. But I don't think there is a smoking gun solution. I think the reason these are precious metals, they are very, very difficult to find,
Hmm.
and a lot of the low-hanging fruit over the centuries has been picked, and so it's why companies like ours have to go further and further north, and others are having to go into the jungles and having to go into really challenging terrain And some of that terrain, some of the things you need for a successful mining operation, like accessing things like water, are just very, very difficult. So that all bodes well for higher prices.
Interesting. That's very interesting. That is a good point that all the silver, the low-hanging fruit being picked off and then it's thrown away in landfills, never to be recycled, really. What are your thoughts on recycling?
I'm not incentivized to recycle because the price is so low.
Yeah,
I'm not even incentivized to develop or produce. I'm
right.
barely. So for me, I would recycle gold all day long at $2,500 an ounce. But if you look at the it just so for me it's a function of price, and so it doesn't make up a significant percentage of where we're accessing our
Right.
silver needs.
Yeah, I don't even think even if they ramped it up, it would be able to put a dent in the amount of silver we need. So yeah,
Not with all these new applications. That's the challenge.
yeah, exactly. And moving forwards, exactly. I'm always trying to look forwards.
Look, I think that I just want to reiterate what I said last time I was on. If you're new to this, go out and start with some physical, get yourself some physical bullion in by way of bars, by way of coins. Everybody should start there. And then if you're looking to take on more risk, go buy a silver miner. Go buy a publicly traded silver miner. There's, Hecla, Pan American. There's some great companies that are out there that are mining this stuff. And but if you're looking for ways to really maximize this once in a lifetime opportunity, I think focus on companies that are adding to their mineral resources. And that's where a company like Dolly Varden can come in and play a role in your portfolio, because we're growing silver inventory at a time where this metal is hated, it's misunderstood, no one's here, no one's watching it, it's undervalued, and we've already seen our business grow. We've already seen, those investors who got behind me 4 years ago, they're up 500%. And they've got a much larger platform. They've got a healthy company here with big treasury, 40 million in the bank, a lot of ounces in the ground, and now has the opportunity to really do something special.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do like the way your company's executing this and the thought process behind it. I really do. And being able to hear from, the man himself, it really is cool to be able to talk to you and get your thoughts on not just, silver mining, but the market itself. So yeah. Anyways, yeah, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on my channel. And folks, if you guys wanted to subscribe, I post daily videos. If you guys want to, check out Shawn, do you have a website or any like
Yeah,
where
we
would
do Dolly, Dolly, Varden, Varden, dollyvardensilver.com is our website. And we've got, I really encourage everybody, put your email in our mailing list. And we go out and we really do a good job of explaining our strategy, explaining, how we go about executing our business model. And I got to hand it to my communications team. They do an incredible job of getting out that narrative to the investing public and talking about what it takes to be successful in this business, having the right shareholders and doing things in a safe, timely manner.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I'll link that. I'll link everything in the description of this. I would like to go over, some of that stuff, like your strategy, like, the whole game plan. I would love to come out and see one of the mines, actually. That'd be really cool to
We would love
vlog
to
it.
have you up, but no, we've got this email. Subscribe to our email list, and you'll
Yeah.
start to see those emails come through, introducing you to the people that are making it happen on the ground. What my philosophy is, what our strategy, who are our shareholders, and I think it's there's a tremendous amount of free education for anybody wanting to know more and to try to get an understanding of our culture and what we're trying to do here. And we don't like we make mistakes. Silver goes up, it goes down, but what we're trying to do here is we're trying to patiently, methodically, um, surgically advance this project in a way where it's a maximum benefit, not only to our shareholders, but also the local communities where we're creating some employment opportunities where, this area provided a lot of wealth to the communities. This was you go back 100 years, this was one of the most prosperous, bustling, from a per capita wealth um, metric. This was the one of the places in North America. And you just have to go back to the Klondike Gold Rush that occurred just north of the area, and you look at all the people that came up from, California or from Oregon, Washington, that flooded the north for that gold rush. And I think snow and glaciers had covered this land for a long time. They've melted, they've moved, they've eroded away, and now we've got good infrastructure, we've got high metal prices, and you don't need to come up here in your sneakers. You could just sit back at your computer and invest in the companies and let us do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, it would just be cool to, go check
No,
it
no,
out.
I'm saying I want
But
you to
yeah,
come up, but I mean for
yeah,
like there are
yeah,
stories during the Klondike Gold Rush where, tens of thousands
right.
of people
Would
came
yeah,
up in pursuit and some of them died and
yeah.
some
A
of them
lot of them died. Yeah, yeah,
and for a lot of them it was not a good experience, right? There was very
yeah.
few that were fortunate. What I'm saying to you is you can actually, from the comfort of your couch,
Right.
get exposure and let the experts give you exposure to the mineral wealth of the region.
Yeah, yeah. It's really cool. All right, folks. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this interview. Make sure you like the video and subscribe. I post daily. So yeah, go check out my last interview with Sean as well. Andy was on. I'll link that in the description as well if you guys want to go check that one out. So yeah. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. This is Silver Slayer. I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace.